Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of On the Shoulders of Giants with Rabbi Shmuel Bloom. Today, we're going to be talking about Holocaust Remembrance. In 1975, Rabbi Shmuel Bloom attended his first meeting of the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah. In this meeting, the Gedolei Yisrael discussed how to make sure that we never forget this historic and tragic event of the Churban of Europe, the Holocaust, which over 6 million Jews were killed just for being Jewish. There ended up being a total of 4 of these meetings, and Rabbi Bloom was there behind the scenes to hear it all the suggestions that were put on the table, why some of them worked, some of them didn't work, and what were the reasons that the Gedolei Yisrael decided to go with some and not the other. So, let's get right to it. I'm Yisrael Yudkowsky. You are listening to the Foundations podcast. We are here for the third episode of the program On the Shoulders of Giants with Rabbi Shmuel Bloom. Last episode, we spoke about the meetings of Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah, how it all started, the reasons it all started, and we're going to turn to you, Zaidi, to see what was the first meeting that you attended of the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah.
It was 1975. I just joined Agudas Yisrael. I left St. Louis and came to January 75. I came to start working for Agudas Yisrael, and it must have been about March of 1975. There was a meeting, and the issue that was brought up at the meeting was the issue of Holocaust Remembrances. There was an annual event at Reform Temple where Jews came together to memorialize the Kedoshim, to memorialize the Second World War, the Holocaust. And Jews wanted to know whether they could participate, whether they could go to Temple Emmanuel, where they went there, and was it right for them to participate? And the broader question is, and the question was, we in the Frum community, what are we doing to commemorate the loss of the 6 million Kedoshim? And something happened. Something happened in the Jewish community. We couldn't just ignore it. We were busy rebuilding. Yes, they were talking about the old time, but we were building yeshivas and building up the community and building up the Torah community. We were busy with that, but at the same time, we couldn't really completely forget the fact that there were Kedoshim, that there was something happened in Klal Yisrael.
I mean, 50% of the Jews got wiped out.
Maybe like about one third of the community, and just to pass it by and to go further without having some sort of recognition of it, as the Belushev Rebbe said in the lager, in the concentration camps, the Jews came to him crying. What were they crying about? Who's going to remember us? They're going to wipe us all out. Who's going to learn Mishnayos for us? Who's going to say Kaddish for us? That's what was bothered them. And to have completely a lack of memory is something that was concerned. And so they had a meeting. Rabbi Feinstein was there, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, Rav Hutner, the Belushev Rebbe, the Novminsker Rebbe. They were the members of the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah. Rav Rudin was also supposed to be there. Rav Rudin wasn't well. He wasn't able to come in from Baltimore. But the others came together, and I was then in the Aguda office. I was a young fellow, and the hush that came upon the office as each one of the Gedolim came into the office and went into the conference room where the meeting was being held. And they had some other issues. They were discussing some very important issues that they discussed beforehand. Rabbi Sher participated with them. And then they invited in people to make the presentation. And I was zeicher to be able to come together with them. I remember Reb David Klein, this was Zechariah Nebracha, especially a Holocaust survivor, talking about how desperate the people felt, the people before they died, how they wanted to have some sort of memory, how they should be remembered, and how they feel that it's important for Klal Yisrael to have a memory. And yet, The problem was, one of the problems is the Chazon Ish had said that we in our generation are not capable of making new Xeris, new things. And because of that, there was a hesitation. But they had to do something.
They can't just forget about it.
Can't just forget about it. And what are we supposed to do? And so the Rabbi Yosef Frankel, who later is now currently a member of the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah, was one of the people who presented. Friends, some for, some against, some participating in the Eternity Manual, some not for participating. And where do we come together? Something wanted to cry. They wanted to have a place to think, remember their relatives and the people they had. And the presentations were made. And after everybody made their presentations, we walked out of the room. And the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah sat for discussions probably almost an hour later.
Just a quick side point, just to understand how it worked that you were in, and then decided just every how often did the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah meet, and also like how exactly did it work? Where what parts were you there, what parts weren't you there? How the whole system works.
Right. So the later on, as I became more senior and as I was more involved, I actually was there for most of the meetings. There's no chairman of the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah. There has not been since Reb Aaron Kotler. There hasn't been a chairman of the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah, and therefore Rabbi Shera was the one who would bring the agenda items to the table. He would present it, and he would call on the different people. And after Rabbi Shera was nifta, that role fell on my shoulders. So I coordinated. So I was there for all the meetings in the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah. Except when there was discussion of adding new members. When there was discussion of adding new members, then Rabbi Sher also walked out. Mm-hmm. And from time to time, as in the 45 years that we're talking about, there were feelings that there was time to add new members, but the discussion of whether to add, not to add, who not to add, nobody but the members of the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah. Right? The Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah is a self-perpetuating body, which means that nobody can add members to the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah. Nobody can suggest them. You can suggest privately.
It goes back to what we spoke last week about that they're in charge,
they're
and at the end of the day, it comes down to
right, and therefore they were the ones who decided, and then they would call us in and say, we've decided that so and so they'd like to add, and they would make usually a phone call from the meeting. Or they decide who should go with delegation to visit the new members that they wanted to add, and that's the way it went up. But otherwise, at that point, the presentations, especially since there were a number of balabatim involved, and so the presentations were made even in the larger group, and then everybody but usually Rabbi Shera, who was like the secretary of serving as a secretary there, went out, and there was discussion, and then when it was finished, they called us all back. Mm-hmm. When they called us all back, they had made two decisions. Number one, the Chazon Ish, the Gedolei Hatorah, at the time, after the Churban, had made a clear decision that we were not capable of making new Xeris, new Yom Tovim or Tanesim. We're not strong enough and big enough to be able to. We don't have the Gedolei Yisrael today who can do that. So they were not in favor of. Some of the people who made the presentations were in favor of having a day. This is a day of memorial. The secular groups had recognized to their mind that this is something that has to happen before. And we need something new. We need a new name. They gave it the name of Shoah. Right? They took them from a pasuk in Tanakh, and so Shoah destruction.
The Shoah name came only after the actual.
After the Churban, mm-hmm. And they said this is like a one-time historical event that happened. Somebody tried to wipe out an entire nation. Agdalim didn't look at it that way. On the contrary, this is a continuation of the Churban. Rav Hutner especially was very makbid not to call it the Shoah, to call it Churban Europe, because this is an extension from Churban Abayis. This is the continuation of the Golos from generation to generation. This was another step, and the Churban was a very big step. and it was greater than the larger than most of the others. But it's all a continuation of the fact that we're in Golus, and the fact that we don't have the Shechina, and we don't have Vnei Yerushalayim, we don't have Mashiach coming. So this is just, it has to be seen as a part of the history of the Jewish people, not as a unique event that was completely separate.
Like a one-at-a-time thing.
One at a time that never happened before and never happened again. And never again. Never again was also something which they were very upset about. Never again wasn't our ability to be able to say never again, that it wouldn't happen again.
We have an army, we have this, we're going to make sure it's never...
It's in the hands of the Rebbe Shalom. On the other hand, they agreed that if we can't make a day, but that we do have to do something. And they had the following idea. European Jewry had made a creation that created the Daf Yomi. And 1923, we spoke about the first Kiddush Gedolei, Rabbi Shapiro, etc. And thousands and maybe tens of thousands of Jews had been learning the Daf. That's something that had gotten very, very schwach. Most of the people were killed out. And there were very few people in the 1940s, 50s in the United States. There's a few small groups of people learning the Daf Yomi. The memorial that we have to has to be not only something that is to remember, it has to be something which helps them live on. It has to be zikaron that helps their neshama. It has to be something that we believe in this case of
neshama, like to say nice for them, to say Kaddish for them.
This is what the Blue Shabbat Rebbe is saying. He says this is what they want. So here you have an opportunity. If we build up the Daf Yomi and we get people learning L'Zeicha Nishmosam, then not only do we remember them, but really it's a zikaron, which is malad in the Neshama. A few months later, I think it was in June of that year, so I think it probably was March, was going to be the Siyam HaShas, the seventh Siyam HaShas of the Daf Yomi. And so the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah said, when you have the Siyam HaShas of the Daf Yomi, a section of the program should be dedicated l'zichron the Kedoshim, and specifically the zichron of the Kedoshim of the Second World War, in such a way that they should be remembered, that it should be a chizuk for more people to learn Daf Yomi and to learn l'zeicha nishmosam, and that's an opportunity for education for the community to remember what this is all about and remember the community. And so that was a decision that was made. And the second decision, and every siyum from then on, that siyum, we asked Rav Gifter to be the one to make the zeich of the Kedoshim. And every siyum afterwards, the Blue Shabbat Rebbe, the Rav Schwab, each siyum, somebody was assigned the task of making a zeicher for the Kedoshim, and it became a significant part of the Torah. They would say a kel mole, and we say the Kedoshim. And in fact, you can show some. Yeah,
there's a beautiful video of that they played in the last Siyam HaShas of all the Moshe Sher and Rav Gifter and Reb Schwab, and really really beautiful video of a short part of each one of their speeches.
The goal of the Nazis, Yamach Shimon, was not only to physically annihilate the Jews of Europe, but to destroy the surviving Jews throughout the world by destroying the Talmud, because they understood that this was the secret of Jewish continuity.
Widmen und dem Siyum, da soll sein der Zikaron für die Kedoshim. Ich muss euch sagen, als gerade ist Chodesh Tammuz, als hat Kufe, meint es bei uns, bei mir persönlich, ein schreckliches Überlebnis, dass der Chodesh, wenn man umgebracht hält, nach all ihre Kedoshim, umgebracht, Yeshiva, die Stadt, Roshi Yeshiva, mein größten Reben, tells it all, Shem Yikoim Damoi. Der Krechts ist nicht auf Fels, der Krechts ist auf Preschburg, auf Warsche, auf Lemberg, auf Krakow, auf Frankfurt, auf wo ist ein Iden gewesen und auf dem ist der Krechts.
Now let us think for one horrifying minute of the 1 million Jewish children who were massacred and sacrificed when they were still young. I once read that somebody who miraculously escaped from inside a gas chamber heard the cry of a young boy imploring his mother, "Mother, wasn't I always a good boy?" At that very moment, when this holy neshama expired, the Rabbanu Shalom took it up Kavayochel into his arms, saying to him, "Och, mein Kind, yes, you were always a good child. From now on, I shall take you into my arms, and I shall become your Rebbe. I shall learn with you. You should learn in my Mesivta Shel Maila, together with your brothers and sisters and fathers and mothers, Hashem Yikam Domam."
There was a second decision that they made. And that decision was that in the yeshivas and the Beis Yaakovs, they should learn about the heroism of the people in the Holocaust or in the Churban of Europe. They should learn about some of the ma'asim of some of the people did, how with Mesiras Nefesh, they learned Torah, they did mitzvahs, they ate matzah, how they did these things. Yeah. The gevura of in the yeshivas, they should, on a regular basis, they should have an opportunity to give a chinuch to the children about the Holocaust.
Yeah, there's also the story with the Hanukkah candles, with the potato and the oil, and people that on Sukkot they like dug a hole in the ground and covered it with bushes, and then they would go in at night to be kind of the mitzvah of Sukkah, and it's
right.
It's,
now, if the first decision of the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah was carried through, and carried through very beautifully, as you just saw in the video, the second decision was not. The second decision of the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah, that there should be Holocaust education, but not sipuri of gvura, sipuri of how we stood up to for Torah and Yiddishkeit, even in the most difficult straits. That was not really very successfully done. And time went on.
Why is that it didn't really work?
It's a difficult lesson. It's a difficult thing. We'll see later on, two meetings in the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah later. We'll see when we discuss Holocaust education. There are great difficulties about it. And it's not easily done. And we'll talk about it. But at any rate, Siyum HaShas won 7 years, 7.5 years. And the question came up, is that enough? Right? Is that enough to perpetuate the memory of the Kedoshim once in 7.5 years? To have the truth is that maybe in the schus of the Kedoshim, that Siyum HaShas we had in Manhattan Center. Rabbi Scherer called me into his office.
This is the seventh
Siyum HaShas. Rabbi Besser was there, and Rabbi Borchad, also Chaim Levrocha, and he called me, and I was a young fellow, just starting work in the Aguda, and he asked if I would help in addition to the work that I was doing, to help make the Siyum HaShas in Manhattan Center. They wanted to have a big Siyum, so they took Manhattan Center to hold 1,000 people. The last Siyum, the sixth Siyum HaShas, was in Beis Yaakov Baruch, about 300 people. Right, so they wanted to go hundreds of people. Rabbi Besser was going to help raise the money. He was going to get each Daf Yomi shir to give $180 to join in to give $180, and they're going to rent the Manhattan Center and build it up. That's where the speech from Rav Gifter that you just heard was said in the Manhattan Center, and it was for that time impressive. But we hadn't the next Siyam Hashas. The next Siyam Hashas, we already hadn't Felt Forum. Felt Forum held 5,200 people, men only. There's no place. It was difficult to make a matzah there. We had men only, and the women complained because they're the ones who pushed their husbands to learn Daf Yomi, and they wouldn't be able to come. And they had people made reservations, but Rabbi Sher was afraid that the people wouldn't come. So Rabbi Sher sent out, had a whole mailing list, a little ticket, say admit one, and little words that says space available. If you come there, first come, first serve, you get the seats. They sent out thousands and thousands of these tickets, and people started coming. Some people maybe had reservations of 2,000 or 3,000, and then they started coming and coming and coming and coming, and they had to close the doors. And had thousands of people on the street who couldn't get in. So we saw the power of what, and every time there was a siyum, we doubled the number of people learning Daf Yomi. It wasn't that double, wasn't so much for the first time, but the second time already, he says now we doubled the amount of people learning. It's a tremendous chus for the Kedoshim. It's a tremendous chus for Klal Yisrael. Yeah. And he went to 5,200 people, right, who filled up. He had a nice event, and Reb Shmuel Yosef Reeder went over to Rabbi Shera and said to Rabbi Shera after the Felt Forum event is that he wants a schus for his father who wasn't well then, a good friend of Rabbi Shera, Rabbi Yaakov Rida. He wanted to help sponsor that the next Siyam Hashah, 7.5 years later, we take the main hall of Madison Square Garden, 22,000 people, right? And to go from 5,000 to 22,000 people,
it's a huge jump.
He says, here's a $25,000 check to guarantee it. Here's any money that you're short, we'll help cover it. But we want to take the opportunity. And the Baruch Hashem helped. We took the main we filled it up, and we had to have the overflow in Felt Forum, which was a part of Madison Square Garden.
Wow!
So we went, and then every siyum afterwards, Kanai Nahara as Klal Yisrael, again we doubled the number of people learning Daf Yomi, and then we filled up Madison Square Garden the next siyum. Months before, we opened up the tickets from months before, and in a few days it was all sold out.
Wow! So
we took Nassau Coliseum. We had a second site. We had Nassau Coliseum and Madison Square Garden, and we had the siyum in both places. And the next time, actually, what happened there was people don't want to be in the second site. So people didn't want
to be in the main event. Yeah.
Right. So people. It was harder to film that. The Madison Square Garden we filled overnight. The
second one
was a little more difficult to fill, but we filled it. So the next time we said what we have to do is take two equal sites. Take two equal sites to take the Meadowlands Arena and Madison Square Garden. And we had half the program in one, half the program in the other.
And people had the choice. Some Rabbanim here, some Rabbanim
here, some there. We had a full day in each place. And so he says, but then it was, you taught 50,000 people. And between the two sites, and we had site by satellite to Chicago, Los Angeles, Toronto. We had close to 100,000 people.
Wow.
Right? From
this is like they had events that they streamed it at, or it was like, each person could watch at home?
No, that's before home streaming. They had actually a satellite. The satellite dish had to come to each venue and shoot it from shoot the site from one side to the other. And they had a local speaker. We actually had one speaker. Rabbi Shmuel Bloom spoke from Chicago. He spoke from Chicago. They had also thousands of people. Toronto had 5,000-6,000 people. Chicago had thousands of people. Los Angeles. It was each of the places. It says, and each time we went. And then we had a problem because there was no site.
Where do you go from there?
Where do you go from there? And the question is, should we take the one place in New York, in the New York area? We couldn't go out of the New York area. That's where the masses of people are. And the one place out of the New York area was in MetLife Stadium. MetLife Stadium.
Over 90,000 seats.
90,000 seats. And my good friend, Tom Yaakov Steinberg, who lives across the street with me from now, was the financial advisor to the Tisch. The Tisches owned the New York Giants, so they were the ones who owned the stadium. He spent many years of his life designing it, working on it, getting the financing for it. And he always was worried. He says, I'm spending all this time to see two football players. I mean, you're also
a football player.
You know what it is, but to get two football players.
It's not a life mission,
This is what I'm spending my life for. And then we decided that we're going to get MetLife Stadium, is that take that as the event for the Siyum HaShas. He understood why he gave his life for that, why he spent so much time, is to be able to have it. And the Kiddush Hashem of having MetLife Stadium and having the 100,000 people. This past Siyum was a big problem because it was in January.
The rain and everything.
The snow and cold. Was January 1st of this past year. And there was a hard decision to whether it was for close to 2 years, including meetings, the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah back and forth, whether to do it in January, to do the Siyum.
Or maybe to push it off, or their thing maybe to put it in a closed venue.
To have four or five closed venues. To have 4 or 5 closed was probably the best option. I recommended making the Siyum before we start learning Masechet Nida in October, right? To make the Siyum, lacrosse, but nobody liked that idea. It didn't get very far. But at any rate, Baruch Hashem, even despite the cold, and it was a clear day, cold, and the 90,000 people came to celebrate.
If it's clear, if it's going to snow, if it's going to rain, you can't really know till like a week before. It's not like you could plan, this years and years of planning. It's not. I
sat in meetings, not only the Siyum before this, the first time we were at MetLife, with the meteorologist for MetLife, who was predicting rain on the night. And the question of pushing, we had a backup date of the next night, but the technical arrangements would have been so difficult. The buses, the trains, the people flying in. So
it wasn't just the stadium itself.
It wasn't just the stadium itself. So we decided that he said that there are going to be pop-up showers throughout the day. It won't rain heavily. Be pop-up showers and so on. So we said, look, we'll take a chance. What happened is the Rebbe Binyomin held, and there weren't pop-up showers. There was a heavy, steady rain all day. We had got thousands of shmatas to be able to clean the seats.
Wow.
To keep away, to prepare the
raincoats,
umbrellas, and so on. For security reasons, they would not have let us to continue if there was a thunderstorm. So, but the Rebbe Binyomin held, he says, till 6 o'clock it rained. The Siyum HaShas was supposed to start at 6 o'clock. At 6 o'clock, the skies cleared. The full moon came out.
This is the one first one, or
the first one we did in MetLife. It was a beautiful night. And he says the Rebbe Binyomin really shown his favor on Klal Yisrael and the people doing, and at the same time, with the art scroll Gemaras, with the tapes who started the Rebbe Teitelbaum was one of the first ones that did shiurim on the phone, and now on tape, and now it became so popular that wherever you go, there are dafyei shiurim and people learning and shiurim and tapes and aids and all different things that anybody who wants to can, and so many people do. It's embarrassing almost that you don't.
It's like you don't learn dafyei. Just Rebbe Stefanski alone, he gives a shiur every morning of 20,000 people. It's just one shiur, and you have all over the world.
Right, all of it. So Baruch Hashem, this idea of the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah, that the best zikaron for the Kedoshim is to take what they created and build on it, and have people grow and learn Torah through that is a tremendous chus for them, and that was tremendously successful.
Mm-hmm.
But, as we said, that's only one thing.
So
Is that once in 7 years?
Yeah.
Is that enough? Is that enough? The issue, and of course, we said the Chazon Ish says you can't make something new, but there was one Jew by the name of Reb Pinchas Herzka. And Reb Pinchas Herzka had what he felt was a simple solution. Nothing in Klal Yisrael is simple, and to sell it was difficult. But he said, what are the Gedolim saying? They're saying that the Holocaust, the Churban of Europe, was a continuation of the Churban from the Beis HaMikdash. We don't have to make a new day. We have the day of Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is the day that's been set aside not only for the Churban Habayis, but the Crusades, but the burning of the Swarm in Paris, is whenever for the Gezeres Tachvatat, is whenever there's Tzoros and Klal Yisrael, is and people die and suffer. The time that we cry started with the Meraglim and continues through the Churban Habayis and throughout the Golos. Tisha B'Av is the day to remember the Holocaust. And there's a precedent for for saying a kinnah, not only for the Churban Habayis, where Moshe the kinnah saw, but saying a kinnah for Tzoros that happened to Klal Yisrael through the Golos. And there was a precedent, the Bavar of Rav Weissmandel, the Rav Schwab, each one wrote a kinnah for their community. And it also has the advantage that it's not a Gzeira for Klal Yisrael.
It's each community.
Each community, yes. But he tried to sell it. He went from Rabbanim to Rabbanim, from community to community, and he got some Rabbanim to back him. Most of the people didn't go along with it.
Mm-hmm.
Until he met with Rabbi Shera. And Rabbi Shera said, the time has come to move on this issue. And a meeting in Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah was held. Rav Gifter was already not well, but he participated by phone, or they spoke to him afterwards. But a decision came out. It's already 40 years. At this point, it was 40 years since the Churban of Europe. And they felt that there has to be more of a memorial, and the memorial should be on Tisha B'Av, and every community should choose the kinnah that they feel is fitting for them, and every shul should say a kinnah on Tisha B'Av, and to memorialize what happened in the years from 1939 to 1945.
And it goes back to it's not a, one thing for the whole Klal Yisrael, it's each community.
Each community. Now, Reb Pinchas Herzka tried to get to do this in Eretz Yisrael also. And Rav Shach felt that if we would do it in America and Eretz Yisrael and so on, to be closer to going against what the Chazon Ish said. Mm-hmm. And therefore in Eretz Yisrael it never took on. And Eretz Yisrael was never successful. But Agudas Yisrael, and they were makbid that we should make it not an Agudas Yisrael project. It should be recognized by all of Klal Yisrael in the different Chassidish ways. Today, I would say 80 to 85% of the shuls in America is to say a kinnah of their choice, l'zechen nishmas Kedoshim. And so a second part of the memorial to the Kedoshim was instituted based on a decision of the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah.
This is one that Reb Shera, after he thought he brought it to the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah, that's when they decided.
And they decided that, right? And they decided it, and they issued a letter. And they said before they issued the letter, they wanted to have other rabbanim from other communities also issuing letters. To that extent that they felt
it shouldn't be like a good thing.
It shouldn't be a good thing. It's something for Klal Yisrael is Zichron HaKadosh.
It was the first time that they brought this idea to the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah?
To the best of my knowledge. Mm-hmm. To the best of my knowledge. I don't think it was brought up before, but also it was 40 years after the Churban. A lot of people had died out of the survivors were all older, and they felt that it was the right time. It was the right time
It's probably like right after, like everybody was still living it. Like everybody had family members and you knew people in your neighborhood. And like it was much less of like, oh, what should we do to not forget? Like everybody around you were in the Holocaust. Like it's not probably like later on it got to a point that it was less and less.
Correct. Right. So there was another decision in the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah about chinuch, about education. And at this point, there started being groups. Mrs. Lichtenstein started to witness. She started a project of Holocaust education, of Churban education, and she published a book. And there were other groups that were doing. But again, it wasn't brought by Klal Yisrael, and for good reason. After Rabbi Sher was nifta, the one who replaced him as the representative for Agudas Yisrael in the claims conference was Avram Biderman. And Avram Biderman saw that they were giving out money for Holocaust education in their communities. And so he suggested that Agudas Yisrael apply for a $10 million grant to give money for the yeshivas for Holocaust education. Agudas Yisrael, when Rabbi Sher was the representative, in principle did not take any grants from the claims conference. They gave it to other from Moetzes, but not to Agudas Yisrael. But since he was on the board, he felt it wasn't proper that he's going to be taking money for his organization. So he, in principle, didn't take it. But now Avram Biderman was the chairman. He wasn't really Agudas Yisrael. He wasn't an executive of Agudas Yisrael. We felt that maybe an exception could be made. And also we felt it was an important thing. And we brought to the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah the possibility of applying for a grant to give money to the yeshivas to teach Holocaust education. And there was a serious discussion, and everybody agreed that it was an important thing to do. But two of the members of the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah were against it. Reb Yisvei and Rav Pam. Reb Yisvei for one reason, which we won't go into now. That's the parts that I didn't write in the book. But Rav Pam was against it because he said teaching what they call Holocaust education, talking about the Churban, is a very dangerous issue. Number one, do you want the children to feel they're persecuted? Because I'm a Jew, I'm going to get killed out. Do we want to present never again? We're going to see to it it's not going to happen again. You cannot do. And how about the question that so many people asked, where was God during the Holocaust? Right? How do you take children 8, 10, 12 years old and starting being presented not to bring up that question, yes to bring up the question? How do you address that question? This is a very serious issue that people aren't trained to be able to answer.
Yeah, you probably have the Gedolim that could teach them. We have every Rebbe now, every teacher in every school, then it could get it's a very delicate situation.
It's very delicate, and you have cause problems of emunah. You can have problems of persecution. So it's not something that you want to just take lightly and say, I'm going to teach Holocaust education. The Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah in the time of 1975 talked about telling stories of Ma'asav of Gura during the Holocaust. That's acceptable. Now you want to talk about the story of Churban, what happened, why did it happen? Right?
Why?
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 Right? And I say, as a lot of the Freya says, where was God during the Holocaust? A lot of people, the Satmar Rebbe, who came to Eretz Yisrael right after the war, and when he left Eretz Yisrael, the Hasidim said to him, "You're going to America. Who's going to give us a bracha? Who's going to take care of us over here?" So he said, "Go to shul, and you see somebody putting on tefillin, and you see he has a number on his arm. He's still putting on tefillin. You can ask him for a bracha." Right? Somebody who came through the Churban in Europe and still putting on tefillin and still has his emunah is a special person. And how do you present that to children? So there were 5 members of the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah who were in favor of the application. There were 2 who were against it. And there, as I say, I was like the secretary of the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah, and we took the roll. Everybody said, yes or no, what they wanted. It was 5-2, and I said, in all my years sitting in the meetings of the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah, when Rabbi Sher was like the secretary, then I never saw a vote of 5-2. Right?
So they always agreed.
It was always a consensus. Mm-hmm. You had a discussion. If you didn't have everybody agree, you discussed it some more until you came to a conclusion that everybody could agree with.
Mm-hmm. Right? Even if someone had this opinion, someone other, they used to discuss it until they came to agree.
Until it was we wouldn't use the word a compromise, but to reach something that everybody could agree with. I don't see that there's a consensus on this issue, so we're not going to apply for the grant.
Mm-hmm.
However, when I reported to Rabbi Yosef Elias, who was a very special mechanech, who wanted very much that there should be education, the Churban, he asked for an appointment with Rabbi Pam, and I set up an appointment with him with Rabbi Pam and Rabbi Rebellia. And what came out of the meeting is that we should apply for a grant, but not for Agudas Yisrael to give to the yeshivas, but for Torah Masorah. The Torah Masorah should teach teachers how to teach the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a grant that we got. And through Torah Masorah, they started a program, and thousands of teachers were given a chinuch of what to say specifically on this issue, how to teach, what to say. Of all the things, one of the things that I picked up, Reb Chaim Dov Keller at least gave a class, and it gave me an insight. We talked about in the last term that when Agudas Yisrael was started, Klal Yisrael was losing the battle. And now, after the Churban, you have more students in the Lakewood Yeshiva, than you had in all the yeshivas in Europe.
Wow.
You have more students in Mir Yeshiva in Yerushalayim than all the yeshivas put together. So that although there was the pain and the tsaras of the people who suffered, and Klal Yisrael suffered, but in terms of Klal Yisrael, the Kodesh Baruch Hu took a dying and suffering community in terms of Torah and Yiddishkeit, and rebuilt it in Eretz Yisrael and in America in 2 thriving, exciting, beautiful Torah communities. So with the long look of Jewish history, right, despite the fact that it was so difficult, and such suffering, and I'm not saying that that's something that we wanted, but what happened was, he says, it turned.
See, at the end of the day,
Klal Yisrael turned out better, and Klal Yisrael grew, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu grew. HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Kiddush Hashem grew.
So mentioning that, after the Holocaust, that it was so, there was no Jewish community, and the whole, like you said, like a third, 6 million Jews were wiped out. So that it was mamish, it was a lost battle. So, how do you even approach and come and have the strength to work on trying to bring it back? If it's such a 6 million Jews are gone, this come out nothing. What gives you the kayach to say no, we're gonna rebuild it?
What happened was a partnership grew between some of the Americans who held on to their Shabbos and all the Yiddishkeit living in America, and the Sheres HaPleita, who gave an injection of chiyus, of love, and they are special people. The Sheres HaPleita, like the Satmar Rebbe said, someone has a number on his arm, and he's going to work to build Torah, to build Yiddishkeit, to recreate it, and they did. And they did, and they saw the nachas, and they saw children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. These people who were came out of the concentration camps, the skin and bones, and felt the strength to be able to come and to rebuild. We all have to show a tremendous amount of appreciation for them, and that's the truth. That's the cycle of Jewish history. That's what the Mashal Chochmah says. The 2,000 years, there was close to 2,000 years of Megillah. So every 100, 200 years, you have some quiet time. Is because the Rebbe has to give us time to be able to sit and learn, and yeshivas to grow, and so otherwise we would forget everything. You become Talmidei Chachamim, and then you become too comfortable. And in the words of the Meshech Chochmah, when Berlin becomes like Yerushalayim, and you feel at home, and children, he says, have to do more than their parents. So there's nothing to do. And the infrastructure is there, and the yeshivas are there. So I'm going to learn more Gemara than my father. I'm going to learn say more Tillim than my mother. Is reach the point they start going among the goyim, and trying to get their ability to do fresh and new things to be created among the goyim, and then they begin to walk away from Klal Yisrael. HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings discrimination and pogroms and ultimate churban, and ultimately you get thrown into another country. Another country you have to build. Yeah. Right, you have to do.
Back
right,
back to the beginning.
It's a cycle. It's a cycle Chachma talks about. This is a 100 to 200 year cycle, but that's what kept Jews as Yad Vashem. That's why Kadosh Baruch Hu kept his nation. That's why in Yad Vashem they're going to be people to be Makabel Pnei Mashiach because of the cycle.
Is it something that the Gedolim bring up, or Askanim, or something they try to work on to make sure that it doesn't happen again? Or you just know that, it's kind of the cycle of the world?
No, so I actually made a presentation at the convention, which wasn't accepted. The Meshech Chochmah explains that every child, the children, have to feel they're doing more than their parents. So they have to have a challenge. And just to do the same thing my parents did, maybe a little bit better, doesn't work. And therefore they go into other places, other groups, away from Torah and Yiddishkeit. I suggested that we give our children a challenge. There are 4 million Jews who are, in the words of Avi Shafran, going to fall off the cliff if we're not making care of them. They're going to be lost to Yiddishkeit. Their children, great-grandchildren, and so on, there they go on, the intermarriage in America. If we would take our children and give them the challenge of bringing back those millions of Jews out in the community, and bringing them back to Torah and Yiddishkeit, then that would give them the challenge. They wouldn't have to find challenges among the goyim. They wouldn't have to find challenges outside. And that would be valuable not for only for the 4 million Jews there, but for us.
For us, something to keep us.
That would break the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
That would break the cycle that we shouldn't go back. And of course, the Reb Chaim Volozhin said that the last Golus Stanz, the last station of Golus, is going to be America. So we know we're not going from the United States to Australia or to Peru, or we're not going to rebuild it. We're coming back to Eretz Yisrael. So, in Moetzes Hashem, the end of the cycle is it should be as close as we can to is the Moetzes Hashem. Mashiach should come soon. We shouldn't have to continue the cycle. One more meeting in the Mosque Torah on the issue was I got a telephone call from a fellow by the name of Yossi Hollander. He wanted to meet with me. And I found that Yossi Hollander, I set up an appointment with him. Yossi Hollander was a child of a Holocaust survivor, born in Eretz Yisrael. And Eretz Yisrael, he was a young man. He emigrated to California and started a .com corporation. He started a couple of them. He's a high tech and sold before the bust of the .coms. He sold one of his companies for $560 million.
Wow!
And he wasn't 50 years old yet. And he said, what am I going to do with all this money? So he decided that what he was...
I wish there would be more millionaires who think that way. Yeah?
Yeah, he said, look, I have enough money, for me, myself, children. So he decided he's going to give it away.
Wow.
But he wanted to give it away not as a charity to give, he's not going to give to yeshivas or schools or whatever the case may be. He says he's young enough and he's in high tech enough that he wants to undertake projects which cost money, and they'll be willing to pay the money, but he wants to be involved in the projects, and he wants to make a difference. He wants to make a change. Mm-hmm. One of the projects that he undertook was the names project of Yad Vashem. Yad Vashem decided after the Second World in the early 1950s that they wanted to have a record of the 6 million Jews who were nifta, who were killed in the Holocaust. First of all, Holocaust deniers come along, they say it didn't happen. Here's a list of the names, here are the people who are. Mm. And they don't have a matzeva. They don't have a place of kfur.
To have some type
so they have a
remembrance.
Place, what they call the daf edus, a page of testimony, where people listed the names of their relatives, their friends, people that they knew died in the Churban of Europe, and they have a hall of records. So they started this project, I think, in early 1950s, soon after the war, and they put together over 2 million names.
Wow.
And then it stopped. 10,000 names they added a year, another 10,000 names. So here we're coming already to the 1990s, and there were just over a little 2 million names. So Yossi Hollander said, this is something that I think is valuable and something that I'm interested in helping out. He put it on the internet. He advertised it. People started entering names, family members and so on. You can add to it online. And they started getting it. And he got it up to about 3.5 million names.
Wow.
He had another million.
Almost doubled it.
Almost doubled. But
again, it started
stop. So he started doing research and he said, they don't know if they get the 6 million, but 5 million they should be able to get. Why aren't we getting the other names? So
we're talking about 2.5 million names over here. It's not,
Right. So why can't we find these names? Why aren't they being added to the list? And he realized, after doing research, that there are 2 areas of names that aren't being added. One of them was behind the Iron Curtain, Russia. In Russia, in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, they had no contact with Yad Vashem. And millions of people were killed there during the Second World War. Mm-hmm. But their relatives and the people who knew about it didn't know anything about Yad Vashem. So anyone behind the Iron Curtain in the Eastern European countries and in Russia, but now it was already in the 1990s, close to 2000, now they had access to it. And so he started a program identifying people in those communities who knew about people who died in the Holocaust, and he started adding names and added a significant number of names. There was another group that didn't put their names in Yad Vashem. And that's the Haredi community. Because the Haredi community,
they don't have internet, they don't have this.
They didn't, besides they didn't have the internet, they also didn't have, Yad Vashem was created as a stone memorial, as a place to cry, a place to go to. And that is what we did. We rebuilt. We were putting kaiches into rebuilding what was there before, and naming yeshivas after the yeshivas that were in Europe, and teaching the Torah that was taught there, and learning the svarim of the people who were there. So Yad Vashem didn't interest us. And Yad Vashem had no contact with the Frum community. So he started a project in Eretz Yisrael in the Frum community. And in America, he said that if you want to get access to the Frum community, you should do it through Agudas Yisrael. Mm-hmm. At that time, I was the executive vice president of Agudas Yisrael. I was the CEO. And I get a call from Yossi Hollander. He'd like to come and meet with me. So we met. We discussed the issue. He explained to me the project. And he says he's willing to fund it. But we have to go to Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah. Right? We have to go to the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah and get permission. I have to explain to them what the situation is, the value of it. Yad Vashem is somewhat of a problem to the Frum community. And there's a Gera group, Ginzach Kiddush Hashem, I think it's called. And the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah said we should do it. We asked them and they said it's a good idea. We should do it together with them also. So it's not just like Kiddush Yisrael and Yad Vashem. And we started such a project. We got permission from the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah to go ahead with it. And today, between the Russian group and the Haredi group on Kiddush Yisrael, there are over 5 million names.
Wow.
Close to 5.5 million names of people who died in the Holocaust. And they did now. There are fewer and fewer people who are alive who will remember. So part of the group was to go. Part of the project was to go. Actually, I'm a Kayan, so I'm not usually going to Beis HaKvaros, but when I went to my father's Levaya, I saw that a number of people, when they had the matzeva, they put on the matzeva the names of the brothers and sisters of fathers, the people who died.
Right, yeah.
And we did that. My father's, his brothers and sisters who were nifta, and so now they started. At that point, they started a project. They went to the Beis HaKvaros, and they copied names down from there. And they went to the shuls.
They need to go through the process to see if it's up already.
The dedications and so on. So so now they have lots and lots of information which they're working on to refine, because they'll have doubles in order not to have doubles, in order to put that together. So that was the final meeting of the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah, at least to my memory, or at this point. But at this point, you have the Siyum HaShas, the L'Zecher Nishmasan. You have the education that's going on in the yeshivas based on teachers who were taught by Terem Surah. You have projects like Project Witness and Mrs. Lichtenstein's also where they have it. And you have a list of their names in Yad Vashem, L'Zecher Nishmasan.
Yeah, and you have on the Tisha B'Av that's more in America. And
right, and the kinder that you have in Tisha B'Av. And Yossi Hollander became a very good friend. And we learned Bechavrusa. Right?
Very nice.
He's my partner in Torah.
Look at that. That's your partner in Torah.
My partner in Torah, and we've been learning for the last since I left the position for the last 10 years.
Wow.
Baruch Hashem.
Like that. That's how you met him.
That's how I met him through this project.
Amazing.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much. It was really beautiful. It was really great. And Emir Hashem, we will be back in next episode. That is it for today. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you were able to learn something new. Hope you were able to put something in your pocket for life. What an amazing episode. It was so incredible to see how literally from 300 people in the Siyum HaShas to now we have in MetLife Stadium, every Siyum HaShas close to 100,000 people. And that's just MetLife Stadium. We have worldwide hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who come to the Siyum HaShas. It was such a crazy journey. It was so incredible to hear behind the scenes and unique stories from Rabbi Bloom, who was there behind closed doors with Gedolei Yisrael at these meetings. So it was very, very beautiful and wonderful to learn. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to share it with your friends and family. Let them know, send them a link, tell them how incredible it was, that they can enjoy it as well. Also, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to make sure that you never miss another episode. Let us know in the comments below what you thought of today's episode, if you have any questions or comments, or you could send us an email to info@JFoundations.com or send a WhatsApp to +972 55 711 6220. Thank you very much for listening. We will be back next week.